My name's Catherine Mahan. I'm one of the co-founders here at Acquaint. Alex, how about you?
Sure. So my name's Alex. I'm really excited to see everyone here today.
So anybody now, if you'd like to share in the chat, we'd love to hear where you're calling in from, what part of the world. You can also share something about yourself if you prefer. It's an awesome group today. It's really great to see everybody. We'll go ahead and move along to this presentation. And if you haven't yet had a chance to share in the chat, feel free to do so at any time. Feel free also to ask questions in the chat. We'll keep an eye on those and answer them as we go along. And we'll also have time at the end of this presentation for more question and answer. So Alex, will you start us off with an introduction about Acquaint and why we think this is a powerful way to connect across the world and why making this effort is so important on behalf of our amazing volunteers?
So Acquaint is an opportunity to help build stronger communities, both locally and globally. And on Acquaint, we really do that as volunteers through a practice of human connection. And what we mean by that is a couple different things. The first part is just regularly connecting with people that we might not normally connect with. So it could be people with different perspectives, cultures, countries, anything that can really limit the amount of contact we have. And the purpose is to really try to learn about each other and understand why do we have different perspectives or what are the differences in culture. The other part of that is intentionally or deliberately trying to get better at connecting with other people. In a conversation on Acquaint, if you connect with someone, you can have a very deep and meaningful conversation very quickly if you choose to. And that can take a lot of practice. And it's what we've found is that it's really a lifelong journey. It's something we can keep getting better at over time. The last part of that is we hope that we can all build skills, continue to improve our skills if we're already good at those skills in things like intercultural communication and knowledge of different cultures, things that we can use potentially in our own local communities and as well as working with the global community. And I think this quote from the United Nations does a really good job highlighting why what we do is really important, which is basically saying that if we don't improve communication, we won't be able to solve global problems. And so as volunteers, that's something everyone will be helping with.
And the way Acquaint works, the way our platform is set up, is it focuses on one-on-one conversations between volunteers, currently who've joined from over 100 countries. And we believe this is a really important way to connect because it allows us to give each other our full attention, really listen and ask questions, and learn from each other's life experiences. And it's all virtual, so acquainters connect from anywhere with an internet connection. There's no physical travel that's involved with this volunteer role. It's all remote and done through our platform, acquaint.org, which we will be sharing more details about how to sign up and what that looks like later in this presentation. And the volunteer role is very much about committing to making an effort, focusing, and maybe challenging any misunderstandings we might have about different people and cultures, doing our best to learn and to share our own experiences as well, which really can make these conversations very constructive and very eye-opening. And I always say that just being part of Acquaint over the last few years, I've learned more about different people and the world and different cultures than the whole rest of my life combined. That perspective changing experience is something we think everybody should have access to. Once again, like Alex was saying, contribute to a stronger global community as well as building stronger local communities as well through this practice of human connection. And this is just a short video clip of a few volunteers sharing the country or region they joined from, sort of a fun compilation I'm going to play now.
We are Acquaint Volunteers. We are from all over the world, including
Algeria,
Bangladesh,
Sierra Leone,
the United States,
Ghana, Hong Kong,
Iraq, Pakistan,
Brazil,
and I am from Nigeria.
And we'll also share links to Acquaint's social media where you can see more content from volunteers, hear what people are saying. There's also full versions from each of those interviews.
Again, our mission as an organization is to build stronger communities, both locally and globally. And as a volunteer community member with Acquaint, you'll help do that by connecting with other volunteers with the goal of trying to learn about each other, promoting intercultural understanding, reducing misconceptions, but also intentionally practicing the skills necessary to have those constructive connections. They say that one of the most effective ways to prevent conflict and thus really build community, prevent violent conflict, is regular direct contact between people, importantly, constructive contact. And that's exactly what we're aiming to do on Acquaint. We're not focused on any specific conflict or issue, though. Instead, we're more generally trying to promote constructive human connection in the world. We've seen that a single conversation can be a lot more powerful than years of just hearing about another place in the world or another group of people. That direct contact can just be a lot more meaningful. And many volunteers, including myself, have had experiences that have really totally changed our perspective on how we look at the world. There's so much to learn out there from different people. With that in mind, one thing we do say is there's no pressure to represent an entire country or culture because there can be so much diversity even within a single family. And so we just want to be careful not to generalize too much from these interactions. With that being said, Catherine's going to talk a little bit about the conversations on Acquaint through the lens of these appreciation notes.
Yes, this is one of my favorite features on Acquaint are these appreciation notes. And just like the conversations themselves are so important for learning and building stronger communities, we think reflection is really important too. And so after you connect for one of these one-on-one dialogues, it will ask you if you'd like to write one of these notes to the person you just spoke with, to your fellow volunteer. And it's a way you can express gratitude to them for their time, and they'll have the opportunity to write one to you as well. But it's also a way to reflect on what about that conversation was meaningful, what specific details were shared, what stories were shared that really resonated with you. And so we very much encourage volunteers to write these notes of reflection and appreciation. And these are just 3 examples we found of appreciation notes that we thought sounded very meaningful and impactful. So I'll read the first of them. It says, "Hi, Hassan. I really enjoyed speaking with you today. I appreciate your generosity in sharing about your life. I really admire your bravery in the face of war and being away from your family. I can't imagine how hard that must be. Good luck on passing your English test. Your English is great." So we can see several things just from this one note. Of course, very specific details about the conversation that one volunteer is appreciating and sharing with the other. It's also clear from these notes just how much the conversations can range in terms of topics. Some can be fairly easy and lighthearted, where you talk about things like your favorite hobbies or your family or maybe your favorite foods. But then also some conversations can be very challenging and may focus on things like violent conflict or hardships or topics that are just more challenging to navigate. And so now Alex is going to talk a little bit about how we do navigate these conversations that can range so widely.
So on each of these conversations, our goal is to have what we say is the most impactful or productive conversation that we can. And that means something a little bit different to each of us. I think generally a good sign that that it's impactful is if you feel like you're learning something from it. And I think the other part of that, aligned with our practice of human connection, is if you feel like over time you're improving your communication skills, whether you're new to practicing communication or you're kind of a veteran of training communication skills. So on these sessions, you can talk about anything that you think will be impactful, and you don't have to talk about anything you don't want to talk about. But as a volunteer, a key responsibility is really trying to make that effort to make the conversation constructive and productive. We do suggest starting with lighter conversation topics. And by that, we mean topics that are less likely to lead to an argument. It's totally okay to talk about more serious topics like geopolitics, values, or any kind of violent conflict in the world. They're definitely a little riskier to talk about, more likely to lead to an argument or something like that. It's totally okay to talk about these things, but we just suggest approaching them with caution. Certain topics can even be illegal or unsafe for volunteers to talk about. I think that's especially true when it comes to violent conflict, where governments may have a close watch on what people are saying. And if their opinions don't agree with who's ever paying attention, that can put people at risk. So if you do want to talk about something more serious, we suggest just asking them if it's okay. We also have these virtual icebreakers. If you have no idea what to talk about, They are optional, but they can be a lot of fun. And I think volunteers use them on at least half of sessions. But in general, the hope is that these conversations are challenging. By challenging ourselves, that's what helps us grow in our ability to connect with each other. Definitely, there's all kinds of different challenges that can arise, which we'll talk about in a bit. But our hope is that you'll feel like you get very good at connecting with people over time by really intentionally trying to have great conversations.
Exactly. And Alex mentioned these virtual icebreakers, which can definitely be fun and also make it a little bit easier to start a conversation with somebody new. And this is just one example of an icebreaker here that's on our platform. It says, if you had to choose one food or meal to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I think it's always neat when a question like this can inspire a deeper conversation. Like you might start talking about your favorite foods, but then it evolves into a conversation about traditions or memories or maybe festivities within a culture. There's so many different things that can come from these icebreakers. And I do think around half of volunteers use them, and the other half might just skip them and talk about something else that's meaningful for them. So this is a tool that's available if you find it helpful. A lot of the icebreakers also include virtual tour format. You have these images and these fun facts that you're kind of looking through together that, once again, if it's helpful for you to start a conversation, you can decide to use those. So now we'll talk about the scheduling. So how are these one-on-one conversations scheduled? Well, we try to make it as convenient as possible for volunteers. So we have a calendar on the website where you can choose the days and times that you're available to volunteer. And then based on the times you enter, you'll be scheduled with other volunteers who are available at the same times. All of these times will appear in your time zone, so you don't have to worry about any time calculations. And the availability does change each week. So usually there's at least 4 or 5 days open for scheduling and the days alternate. So in this example here, it looks like Saturday is unavailable, but the following week, Saturday might be completely available, and then, another day is blocked off. So we just ask volunteers to check the calendar regularly and make sure that your availability is up to date. Now, you won't be scheduled for every time slot you enter. Normally, you'll be scheduled for about half of them. So if you enter 3 time slots in a week, you might be scheduled for 1 or 2 sessions. Another note is that there's no minimum time commitment for volunteering with Acquaint. Do as much or as little as you like. Some volunteers do sessions every week. Other people might just be a couple times a month. So again, it really is your decision how much time you'd like to commit. The last thing I'll mention about the time zones specifically, Acquaint is not open 24 hours a day. Usually it's open within about a 17-hour range, and so there will be some times of day that are closed and some that are open, and depending on what part of the world you live in, there might be more availability in the afternoons or the evenings. For some of you, it might be the mornings. Check the calendar and see what works best for you. You'll get reminders for upcoming sessions via email and via WhatsApp that you can use to help you remember them.
So we like to talk a little bit about the benefits to volunteers. Again, the mission is to really build stronger communities, both locally and globally. And many volunteers join because they see the importance in doing that. But we also believe that in order for this to become a movement towards many more people practicing human connection and trying to bring communities together, there has to be benefits in our own personal lives as well. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. But in addition to this practice of human connection, volunteers join for many reasons. Big reason is for professional development. Perhaps you're applying to international programs or jobs, or just you want to work on your intercultural communication skills, like perhaps you want to work with people internationally. Also, many volunteers are practicing English, which is something we really support. Additionally, you can earn certificates from doing this, which you can share in, your resume, CV, or job applications. We also offer communication training courses, which you will unlock as you volunteer. So those can be really helpful as well. They're optional for volunteers, but they're on topics like active listening or things like that. But in general, again, the whole point of the Acquaint platform is really to make this practice of human connection as rewarding and as accessible as possible. And the question we ask is that if you could improve your relationship with not only the people you care about the most, but also the people you're just meeting, and also perhaps coworkers, potential business partners. What would improving those relationships mean to you? And the idea is that if we can practice human connection and get better at it, which all the research points that we can get a lot better at it over time, then we can make that a reality. And that's something that will pay off for the rest of our lives as we continue to connect with more people. So a couple things that aren't a benefit. There's no monetary compensation. If you're looking at it like that, I would look at it more as an educational opportunity or a professional development opportunity. It's not a fast way to form long-term or business relationships. And that's just because of the way the platform is designed. We'll talk about why that is, but everything's really built around this practice of human connection. And it's also not a good place to promote political or religious ideology. It's against our rules to intentionally or forcefully try to push ideas onto other people. It's okay to share what we think, of course, but we just want to make sure that our focus is, as volunteers, what can we learn from this experience? How can we grow and improve as individuals, rather than trying to change anyone else? So if anyone does try to forcefully push their beliefs on you, let us know, because that is against our rules.
We want to make sure that everybody who joins our community feels safe and feels welcome. And so far, we've had between 15 and 20,000 hours of conversation take place on the platform. So far, we haven't had any reports of any kind of abuse or trolling, which we want to keep it that way. And I think because this is a volunteer opportunity, people really feel a sense of responsibility to uphold the standards and the guidelines. And it's just led to these really respectful conversations between people from across the world that, while certainly challenging at times, have been very productive and constructive. So that's been amazing to see. And we do have some rules in place that are meant to help safeguard Acquaint and the volunteers. And one of the most important rules, which is definitely unusual for an online platform, is that the sharing of contact info is prohibited during the sessions. So when you're in one of these one-on-one conversations, like Alex was saying earlier, you can talk about any number of different things about your lives, anything you'd like to share, except contact information. We don't exchange phone number or email, any kind of social media, basically anything that could be used to stay in touch with that person is off limits on the platform. And we have this rule for a couple reasons. There is a safety and privacy component there, but also we really want to keep the focus on that conversation and what we can learn in that moment, and not on any sort of future transaction or material gain. For example, there won't be anybody on Acquaint who's just trying to sell you something, or trying to form long-term business relationships or romantic relationships, because that's not what Acquaint is designed for. Of course, there's a lot of places online where you can do each of those things, but we really want to keep the focus on having as meaningful a discussion as you can and not worrying about any sort of future relationship. That's really helped lead to so many meaningful conversations. Now, I will say there are opportunities outside of the one-on-one sessions where this rule doesn't apply. For example, throughout the year, we have networking style get-togethers via Zoom, where we do breakout discussions, any sort of group get-togethers. This rule does not apply. It's only the one-on-ones that we're very strict about not exchanging contact information. So Acquaint's one-on-one sessions are also audio only, which I think is important to note, because it does add an extra layer of challenge. You can't see each other's faces, you can only hear each other's voices, which really makes listening that much more important. And slowing the conversation down if needed, really trying to understand each other, because you don't have the facial expression or the body language to communicate. And it's audio only because, well, really there's two reasons. Not everybody's comfortable appearing on camera, so there is a privacy component. But also, depending on where we're located in the world, the cost of streaming video can be prohibitively expensive in terms of bandwidth. So it just allows more people to participate, having it be audio only.
We also have this anyone, anywhere commitment, which is a commitment to make an effort on every session that we have, regardless of who we're talking to. We'll definitely like some volunteers that we talk to more than others. I think that's really normal. We just want to treat every session as an opportunity for us to practice human connection. And sometimes it's more impactful to practice with people we have a harder time getting along with. It can make it more challenging, for example, if we disagree on something important, or if we have very different cultures, the same words or phrases may mean different things, which can add to challenges of communication and make being tolerant very important because we may miscommunicate more frequently. And also, regardless of things like location or accent, personality, identity, beliefs, or perspectives. So there's some exceptions to this. If someone was ever hateful, harassing, or abusive, or you feel unsafe, please just end that call immediately and let us know. We want to make sure that we address that. This has never actually happened before, which is great, but it always could. And so we want to make sure that, if that does happen, please do just end it and let us know. Also, don't give up on trying to understand other accents. We all have different accents, and what we found is with a little bit of effort and focus, it can get a lot easier to communicate across an accent difference. I found after a few years of doing Acquaint, it's gotten much, much easier for me to understand new accents quickly. Sometimes in one of these conversations, it means both session partners might slow their speech down a little bit to make it a little easier to understand. Through that effort, we find it's a very manageable challenge. Also, a lack of chemistry in the conversation. I think we talked about this a little bit, but different personality types, different cultures, even sometimes you may be talking to someone that you may think is less interested in talking to you based on, what they've said or how they sounded. Different cultures and different personalities expressing interest might be very different. And so we want to focus more on what can we do to make the conversation as impactful as possible, rather than judging the skills or motivations of our session partner. So, and also minor technical difficulties. We'll talk about that in the next slide. So English is a current limitation, but we have many volunteers who are practicing English. We generally say like an English level needs to be B1 or conversational English. I'm trying to learn Spanish right now and it's really hard. So I have so much respect for anyone who can speak multiple languages. We do hope to expand into other languages in the future. Right now, we just don't have the resources to do so. That being said, if you happen to speak another language that your session partner also speaks, you can choose to speak another language on the sessions if you want. Tech problems. So you'll almost certainly run into some audio issues or audio disconnects. You might be in the middle of a conversation and the audio just cuts out and you can't hear each other for a little bit and then it gets connected again. This can definitely be frustrating, but we ask volunteers just to be supportive and patient and try to work through it. There's a help button in each session that you can use that will summon us to help work through any issues that you may have. Also, showing up on time is really important. So the system is somewhat automatic. And so if you do arrive on time, and by on time, we mean right at the session start time, then we'll definitely get you paired with another volunteer for a session. But if you're more than 5 minutes late, we might no longer have anyone to pair with you. And so the session might not happen. So do keep that in mind. Also, really fundamental to the volunteer role is making an effort, doing our best to be respectful, and paying attention. And these sessions definitely take work. I think it's a lot. In many ways, it's like an exercise. Sometimes we compare it to football. If you imagine you're on the field and you're playing a game, but instead of paying attention to the ball, you're checking your email or text messages on your phone. That game is probably not going to go too well for you. The same thing is true for a conversation or really any interaction that we can have with other people. If we're paying attention and making an effort, it's transformative for the quality of those interactions. And so that's really what we're asking of volunteers is when you're on these sessions, do your best. They can be challenging, and we all want to rise to that challenge to make it the best conversation it can be. And also, just to repeat the no sharing contact info rule. Again, we know this is a weird rule, but it's been so critical for maintaining the quality of the community. If we didn't have this rule, we would have a lot of people joining to try to sell you things, for example, or just form romantic relationships, all things that would really disrupt the quality of the conversations. So we do have to take that rule very seriously. We've also found that by taking that transactionality or potential for a future relationship out of the conversation, often leads to deeper conversations.
And we're almost at the end of our presentation today, so now we'll talk about next steps If you decide you're still interested in being part of our volunteer community, the most important next step is to create your account on our platform. And Alex is going to put a link in the chat to do so. Once you create your account, you'll also get the volunteer handbook, which will have everything we talked about in this presentation. Once you've created your account, you've got the handbook, there's a short multiple choice quiz we ask everybody to complete that's based on the handbook. And we asked everybody, pass the quiz. You don't have to get every answer right, just most of them. And that's just to ensure that you have all of the information you need to get started on volunteering. So the last step in the volunteer training is to do your first 2 sessions with mentors, and mentors are experienced volunteers. They're people who've been part of Acquaint for a while. They've done at least 15, 20 hours of sessions, and they'll just welcome you to the platform, maybe answer any other questions that you might have. But be sure to treat those mentoring sessions just like regular Acquaint conversations where you're trying to learn about your mentor and they're trying to learn about you, and you're having this experience of human connection, exchanging your stories and learning from each other. The mentoring sessions are very much Acquaint sessions as much as anything else, so it's important to treat them as such. Just one quick note about scheduling the mentoring sessions. Scheduling for the mentoring sessions is a little bit more complicated because we ask you to enter at least 5 time slots within the week to be scheduled for one. And we say this because we have fewer mentors than other volunteers. And so it's just a smaller pool of people to schedule you with. And the scheduling gets much easier after the mentoring. Normally, we say during weeks you'd like to volunteer, enter at least 2 time slots, but specifically for the mentoring, it is 5. The last point is just make sure that you do your best to show up for those mentoring sessions, because if you do get scheduled for one and you miss that session, it may just delay your start time. It may be another week or 2 at least before we're able to schedule you again, just because we have a lot of new volunteers who are joining Acquaint. All right. And then finally, we have our social media links. Please do like and follow Acquaint on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. It helps us out a lot. And we also think it's great, I think, especially for new volunteers to see and read some of the things that current volunteers are saying about their experience. So you can have some insight into people's thoughts and stories. Alex, anything else to add before we open it up for more questions?
Well, if you like data about the things you do, or you're just interested in tracking your progress towards a certificate, we do have a page that is part of your profile once you've created an account called the Impact page, which will show you the number of sessions you've done, how many hours you've volunteered, as well as any certificates or badges you've earned. You'll also see any appreciation notes you've either written or received from other volunteers, which is a lot of fun. So just wanted to let folks know about that.
All right. Well, I hope you all have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or nighttime, depending on where you're located. And we're very grateful that you joined us today and that you are interested in learning more about Acquaint and the volunteer role. I really appreciate each of you. And again, don't hesitate to reach out with questions at any time if you need assistance or there's something else you would like to know. Thank you all again so much and take care.
Yep, thanks everyone so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.